Hi, welcome to Beyond Politics. I'm Catherine Clark. The Right Honourable John Turner served as Prime Minister of Canada in 1984, and before that had enjoyed a respected career in Cabinet. However, a little known fact about John Turner is that before he entered politics, before he even became a lawyer, he was an elite athlete who qualified to compete in the 1948 Olympics, and he was a Rhodes Scholar. John Turner joins me now in Toronto to talk about life beyond politics. John Turner, welcome to Beyond Politics. It's a real pleasure to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kevin.
You know, sir, I'm not sure that most Canadians are aware of the fact that you were born in England. I didn't know that, in fact, before I was doing research for this show. Where were you born?
I was born in Richmond, Surrey, right in the center of London, right next to Twickenham, where the tennis is held. My father was a theater critic for the Manchester Guardian, and met my mother when she was over doing research at the London School of Economics.
Your mom was such an accomplished woman. There were probably not a lot of women at the time who were at the London School of Economics. Was she reluctant? Did she ever talk about reluctance to settle down and to become a wife, or was she madly in love with your dad?
She never talked about him because he died very young, at 29 years old, of a thyroid operation that didn't work.
Isn't that awful? Do you remember him at all?
No. I was only 4 years old, and my sister Brenda and I returned to British Columbia with my mother. That's where she was born.
Right.
Rossland, British Columbia, a mining town.
When you came to Canada, do you have memories of arriving? Did you take a plane and then a train, or how did it?
I don't know planes in those days.
You took a boat?
We took a boat,
right.
A boat to Quebec City and Montreal, and then took the train, the Canadian Pacific Railway, from Montreal right to Calgary, and then we took the other train to the Kootenays to Rossland. I remember the train ride.
Do you? What do you remember?
I remember the conductors and the porters and all the people getting up and down the steps. It was fun.
Did it feel like...
And then the Rocky Mountains.
Oh, and they're so beautiful. They're so memorable. They're hard to forget.
That is right.
And as a little boy, too, being on a train would have been pretty neat.
It was fun.
Yeah. Were you aware that the reason you were back was because your dad had passed away? I mean, were you...
Not really, no.
You were too young.
Yeah.
Yeah. You grew up... you moved back to British Columbia, but then you seemed to be in Ottawa. Where did you grow up?
My mother, in 1934, applied for the job as chief economist to the Tariff Board.
Wow.
It had just been set up in 1934 by R.B. Bennett. So she wrote the Prime Minister from Rossland.
Yes.
And he gave her the job.
No kidding.
Yeah. So we moved to Ottawa on Spark Street, and then we were in Sandy Hill. We had 3 separate homes outside of Sandy Hill. 134, just opposite St. Albans Church.
Yeah.
232 and 434, all on Daly Avenue. And had a great time.
Now, was it unusual at the time to be able to write a letter to the Prime Minister about something and get a response?
I suppose it was, but she got a response, and she got the job. She had the qualifications. And she rose to become the senior female in the public service of Canada.
Right.
During the latter days of the Depression, she had that job. And then during the war, she was chief economic advisor to the Minister of Finance, Mr. Ilsley, during the wartime problems of finance.
Isn't that so exceptional? Did she ever talk about what it was like to be a woman, a single mother, and a woman with such a tremendous education and such huge professional responsibilities?
No, she never discussed that with us.
Really?
She was a good
Did you ever ask?
No, it was a good mother. We just thought that she was normal.
So you just thought this was what all mothers did?
Well, we went to church every Sunday at St. Joseph's Church on Wilbrod Street. And after 11 o'clock Mass, we went to the Chateau Laurier Hotel, had a swim in the swimming pool, and then had a buffet.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, sensational.
Sounds like a pretty happy childhood.
It was a happy childhood.
You were at what was called at the time, was it called the Normal School in Ottawa?
It was the Normal Public School in Ottawa, which was closed during the beginning of the war in 1939 by the RCMP, who took it over as part of their headquarters.
Oh.
So I went to Ashbury for a couple of years, and then to St. Patrick's High School.
Okay.
Same high school that Dalton McGuinty went to.
Yes, and my mom was at Notre Dame.
Oh, there you are.
Which was the sister school.
Yeah.
And I was an Elmwood girl. which was just down the street from Ashbury.
I know
so
Elmer
we used
well.
to chase after you, Ashbury boys, I tell you.
Of course, Ashbury has its own girls now.
It does have its own girls, yes, much to the sadness of the Elmwood female population.
Yeah.
You moved to British Columbia, as I understand it, when you were 16, is that right?
16, yeah.
Your mom remarried.
Yes.
Yeah. That must have been a shock. Or were you planning to go to UBC anyways? Because that's where you ended up.
No, it was a shock.
Yeah.
But there it was, and so we moved when I was 16.
Yeah. Did you leave all your friends behind then?
In Ottawa?
Yeah.
Well, I kept in touch with many of them right throughout my life.
Right. But you were really young when you went to UBC. You were 16 years old.
16, and it was the year that the veterans came back in 45, so it was quite a
mishmash?
It was quite a mixture, the veterans and us young kids.
Yeah.
But it worked.
Must have been tough for the veterans when you think back on it. And
it was tough.
And all they'd seen.
Yeah. But the atmosphere was great at the University of British Columbia.
And they had an influx of students, as I understand it, because of that.
We went from 2,200 students to 15,000 students.
That's a big influx.
Yeah.
And yet you still became one of the most popular men on campus, as far as I understand. You were an athlete. You were well known. You wrote also for the local paper, or the student paper.
I was the sports editor of the UBC,
right.
The student paper.
Yeah. Let's talk about the athletics, because you were exceptional. You were one of the fastest sprinters in the country.
I was the fastest sprinter.
You were the fastest sprinter.
9.6.
Isn't that amazing?
100 yards.
When did you realize you had the talent?
Oh, when I was a kid in school, I used to win every race.
And when you got to UBC, did you just decide to join the track and field team?
No, I swam for the university in the first year.
Okay.
The breaststroke.
Right.
And then I got talked into going on the track team and ended up leading them to the Pacific Northwest Championship against outfits like the University of California, Southern California, University of Oregon, University of Washington, Washington State, Oregon State.
Wow. So you did a lot of traveling, too, up and down the coastline. Yeah. And you won a dramatic race in Los Angeles, didn't you? That you remember there were thousands of people in the stand.
I didn't win the race. There were 100,000 people at the Los Angeles Coliseum.
100,000? Wow.
In 1948. Mel Patman of the United States, Lloyd LaBeach of Panama, John Trelawney of Australia, 4 other guys, myself. I finished third in 9.6. Mel Patman lowered the world record from 9.4 to 9.3 in that race.
Wow.
And he later went on to win the Olympics in London that same year.
You yourself qualified for those Olympics, the 1948 Olympics.
Then I was in an automobile accident and hurt my knee.
Yeah, what happened?
It just screwed up the knee.
Yeah, you were hit by a train, though. Were you not?
No,
you were in a car?
We were bounced off by a train, yeah.
You were bounced off. It's kind of the same thing to me. That's still being hit by a train.
Yeah.
That's something. Tell me how you felt at that time, because I have to imagine that as an athlete and an elite athlete, you must have been devastated.
No, I always took what happened to me as God's will and lived with it.
Really?
Yep. I went on to other things for a while, and my knee came back, and then I was on the Oxford track team.
Yeah.
With Roger Bannister.
That kind of acceptance of a difficult situation, is that just in your nature, or is that the way that your mom approached things, or the people around you?
It's in my nature, but I inherited from my mom.
Yeah, because that's pretty remarkable to be able to feel that way. A lot of people just would be angry. Mm-hmm. Tell me about going to Oxford then, because at that point you applied, or I'm not entirely sure how the process works, to become a Rhodes Scholar. Someone said to you that you should look into it because
my professor did.
Okay, because you had everything that it took. You were the whole package, and you actually beat out 49 other people, and you were named a Rhodes Scholar.
Yep.
That's a big achievement. Your mom must have been happy.
Yeah, she was happy I was going back to England and going to Oxford, and she came over to see me a number of times. It was a great excuse to get back to London.
Yeah, and see all of her friends, too. London must have been, and Oxford at the time, a very interesting place, with the war recently over and the country very much still rebuilding. What do you remember of that time?
I remember that the British people were really struggling to make a comeback, and they were making a great comeback.
Yeah, but it must still, as a Canadian, have been quite an experience. I mean, you had you would have gone to school with and known people who had fought in the war, and now here you were studying in a place that was still recovering from it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right.
Were you firmly committed to your academic career, or did you allow a little bit of a social life to creep in too?
Well, I enjoyed the academic career, but I enjoyed my athletic career too, because I was on the Oxford athletic team, which was the track and field team.
Yeah.
Our captain was Roger Bannister.
Oh, right.
Who later went on to run the first 4-minute mile.
Right.
And Christopher Chataway, who was the world record holder in the 5,000 meters. We had a great team.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a great team.
Yeah, we were European champions, and we went over and beat the hell out of Harvard and Yale. And,
must have made you proud.
Yeah.
You followed up Oxford with a stint in Paris, is that right?
Yes, I took my doctorate in private international law at the University of Paris.
And your sister was there at the time.
And my sister Brenda was there.
Yeah. And you took her on a tour of, as I understand it from the book Elusive Destiny, you took her on a tour of France that included stops at the homes of all of the women that you had made friends with over the years who lived in France.
Well, we saw a lot of them.
That's good.
And we hit a lot of the wineries too.
I would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
Is this where you learned your French?
Yes, in Paris.
Because you managed to speak it so fluently that you were able to function later in life in a professional career in Montreal,
right.
And then very much on the public stage. Did you take classes in Paris, or did you just learn it through?
Just learned it when I was sitting in
Did you
class.
really?
Yeah.
You didn't take any of your classes in French or anything?
The classes were in French.
Oh, so when you were in Paris, your
Yeah.
classes. But had you had any basis in French before
No.
that? No kidding.
Oh,
That's quite a feat.
You just learn the language and get with it.
Wow, that's quite remarkable, in fact. So you received a letter from your stepfather suggesting that it was probably time now to consider what your options were going to be professionally. But one of the things that you were thinking of was that you might be a priest. Was that still on the cards then?
It was in my mind, yeah.
And why did you decide not to follow the priesthood?
I enjoyed the practice of law when I started in Montreal, and Montreal was a great town in those days. We're talking 1953.
Yeah.
And I was the first student at Stikeman and Elliott when they set up the firm. I had a great time.
See, those are two very different career paths, a lawyer in Montreal and a priest. How did you make the decision? Was it just that?
It just happened, and it didn't happen. I was the legal advisor to Cardinal Leger, the Cardinal Archbishop of Montreal.
Yeah. So.
I used to have dinner with him once every month in French.
Right.
He once asked me, John, do they think I want to become Pope? I said, well, there are some rumors, evidence that you're campaigning. Yeah. I said, yeah, they've even got a name for you. Hey, what name? Well, you know, there was Pions, Pius the 11th.
Yeah.
Pidous, Pius the 12th. They think you're going to be pea soup.
Do you think it was funny?
He liked that.
No, that's good. So it seems like you managed to bridge both worlds.
Yep.
You developed an interest in politics.
Well, I became, over the years, president of the Junior Bar of Montreal. The Junior Bar were lawyers with fewer than 10 years practice. Every third year, the president was an Anglophone, so I was the president in 1960. And I came through with a resolution of the Junior Bar in favor of legal aid. And I was invited to the Kingston Conference.
Can I ask you, just before you go on, was there no legal aid at that point?
No legal aid.
Okay.
So I went to Kingston with the authority of the Junior Bar and presented my paper. Mr. Pearson and Walter Gordon and Mitchell Sharp and Alan J. McEachran all liked it. And I was persuaded to run for a nomination in St. Lawrence, St. George in 1962, in the heart of Montreal. Guy Street on the west, Saint Denis on the east, the Old Port, around McGill University to Jean Talon.
Wow, what a great riding.
A third English, a third French-speaking, a third immigrant.
Yeah.
I once said at a big public meeting, I can stay here for life because I can't insult everybody at the same time.
Did you...
It was also the riding of D'Arcy McGee.
Was it really?
One of the fathers of Confederation.
Isn't that something?
One of my heroes.
So a lot of history.
Yeah, Mike.
Did you know what politics was about, or was politics just, were you very new to it?
Well, I knew what politics was about.
Yeah.
I lived with it in Ottawa.
Sure.
And I lived with it in Montreal. I was one of Jean Drapeau's chief English-speaking advisors when he ran for mayor of Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a people game for me. I enjoyed it.
When you ran, did you think you were going to win? Or did you run for the experience?
I thought I had a chance of winning. I ran against the president of the Conservative Party,
Yeah.
Egan Chambers.
Yeah.
At any rate, we had our headquarters on the corner of Peel and Sherbrooke Street, the number one corner in Montreal. We had balloons, big balloons above our headquarters, which is when Mr. Pearson visited me at the rally during the election.
Yes.
Some McGill students cut the balloons and they went up in the air, and they had to ground the airport.
You're kidding?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of hot air.
A lot of hot air.
Wow.
So anyway, that's...
You made a really big impact in that campaign because you also involved young people.
Yep.
And that has been something that has, and even now, the interest in many politicians is to find a way to involve young people, and you found a way to do it way back when.
Yep.
Yeah. Why was that important to you?
Because I felt that they had a duty to give something back. One of my heroes in the church was St. Augustine. To him whom God has given some talent, let him give some back. Democracy does not happen by accident. People have to give back.
Yeah, that's been a theme for you forever.
Since my speech at the
Yeah.
Kiwanis Club on Sherbrooke Street in Montreal, 1963.
Does it, have you found that young people have listened to that message?
They listen, but they're a little discouraged about what Parliament is like these days.
Yeah, yeah.
The member of Parliament isn't as important as he or she used to be.
What was it like when you went in?
It wasn't bad. I mean, we had private members' bills and standing committees, and yeah, it was more participatory.
Yeah. Were you worried that you'd lose your law career after you won? Did you give that any thought? I mean, were you concerned about putting that on the back burner? And
it was a full-time job, public life, and what happened afterward would take care of itself.
Yeah. Were you married at that point? Had you already married?
I was single.
Oh, you were single when you became an MP?
Yeah.
Okay.
But my wife-to-be met me just before the election.
Right. She worked on the campaign.
She was a computer expert with IBM.
Yes.
And she set up the first computerized riding slate in Canadian history. We computerized St. Lawrence, St. George. So we knew where all the voters were.
You know, you mentioned Mrs. Turner and her obvious training and intelligence as well. And your mother, as we've talked about, was also a very independent, intelligent, highly educated woman. Did your mother's impact on you affect, do you think, your choice of a spouse, that you chose a woman who was intelligent and independent?
I don't think so, but it might have, I was used to intelligent women.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for the time, I have to imagine.
And of course, I knew a lot of intelligent young female lawyers in town, too.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's interesting, though, because it must have also been difficult for your wife when you were in public life. And you were an MP, and she married an MP.
But she was a great campaigner.
I'm sure she was.
She loved it. And so she was a great partner there.
Yeah. And you have 4 children, and 8 grandchildren now, I understand.
8 grandchildren. Yeah.
That's a lot of grandchildren. Who remembers the birthday presents?
I remember the date.
Do you?
My wife gets the presents.
Okay. Well, that's a fair trade-off. That seems like a fair trade-off. So to backtrack, you're a young MP, and you're in the House of Commons. When you had been there a little bit, a couple months, did you feel that you'd made the right decision?
I felt comfortable with it, yes.
Yeah.
It was a great challenge.
Yeah. There's a wonderful story about you in, you'll have to help me here, was it Tobago or was it Barbados, when you rescued someone who'd become a friend?
Tobago.
Yeah, so you were sitting on a beach.
Right.
And at the time you saw a man go into the water.
My wife did.
Your wife did.
It was Mr. Diefenbaker.
It was Mr. Diefenbaker. And he was caught by the undertow.
Caught by the undertow, and I went out, grabbed him by his trunks, and dragged him in.
What happened? What did he do? Was he breathing?
Oh, he was fine. We got him out.
Did he thank you?
Yep, and we never talked about it.
Wow.
And the only reason it ever became public is he told Sean O'Sullivan, who was his executive assistant.
Yeah.
Later, Sean was a member of Parliament for Hamilton. Then I got him into the Catholic priesthood, and he wrote a book, My Two Houses, the House of God and the House of Commons. And in that book, he mentioned that I had saved Mr. Diefenbaker's life. That was the only reason it ever became public. I never mentioned it to anybody.
Wow, that's actually quite good of you. I think in this day and age that people would make great hay about having done something like that. It's also interesting that you had a friendship with someone like Mr. Diefenbaker, who was of a different party.
Well, I was a great friend of Tommy Douglas, too.
Yeah.
Well, that was the Commons in those days.
But do you think that's possible now?
It's more difficult now.
Yeah. We interview a lot of members of Parliament, and they say that the partisanship now is often quite difficult, that it's still possible to work across party lines, but that it is more difficult now. You're the only MP to have served in 3 provinces. Is that right?
Yep.
So you've served in Quebec and in British Columbia, and help me with the third?
Ottawa,
in Ontario, yes. Okay.
Ottawa, Carl.
That's quite something to be the only. You've served in 3 provinces of the country. That's really remarkable. You left politics in the mid-1970s. And you left at a time, you're widely credited as being an exceptional justice minister, or finance minister, excuse me, as well, but you left from finance. Why did you leave? Why did you go back to private life?
Well, I left because we'd campaigned against price and wage controls in the 75 election, and 6 months later Trudeau brought it in, and I said, we campaigned against it. I'm not going to be part of it.
Was it a tough decision?
Tough decision, yes, but at any rate, I felt comfortable with it.
Yeah. Well, how did your family react?
They were glad to get out of politics, I think.
They were, eh? Was it tough on your kids to be in politics and in Ottawa?
No, Ottawa was good.
Yeah.
And they were at the Rockland Public School, and they liked Ottawa.
Yeah. Where did you go when you left politics?
I went to a firm called Macmillan Bench here in Toronto.
In Toronto, okay. Did you enjoy those years of private life?
Oh, yeah. I had a great time. 8 great years with Macmillan Bench. We still have reunions, about 5 or 6 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then why, if they were great years, go back, as you did in the 80s?
Well, the party needed something, and Mr. Trudeau had stayed on too long, and the party was a mess.
Yeah.
We're way behind in the polls. It was a stupid decision I was supposed to do. My wife thought it was stupid. But I was persuaded to run, and I ended up in the leadership.
Yeah. Do you remember that leadership? Do you remember the convention and what it was all? Yeah. Yeah. A happy experience or a
It was a happy
bruising
experience. No, it was a good human experience.
Yes. Then you had you had a tricky couple of 4 years, I suppose, after the 1984 election, and then 88 was really an election where you did so well in the debates that you took the country's attention again. What are your memories of that time period, of that 88 election? Because you came very close. You must have.
Well, that was something I believed in. I'd read the agreement, which gave me an unfair advantage over Mr. Mulroney.
The free trade agreement, you mean?
The free trade agreement. And it wasn't free trade. And I tore the thing apart intellectually. And it was confirmed by 6 American senators who came up to visit our caucus, as they did the Conservative caucus, and answer the questions that I put to them. And they agreed with me, in effect, that it wasn't free trade. And as Senator Lloyd Benson, the chairman of the Finance Committee of the United States Senate, later Secretary of the Treasury, said, Mr. Turner, I want you and your colleagues to understand one thing quite clearly. The United States Congress will never, I repeat, never, yield its jurisdiction over trade. And they didn't. It's not a free trade agreement. We've done fairly well under it, despite it.
You were at the time also facing numerous inter-party issues, which every leader of a party has to face. But I also wonder how that affected your general sense of the world around you. Because when you're dealing with people who are not necessarily proving to be loyal, and that happens all the time in politics, it can affect your worldview. It can affect how you think of the people around you, how you think of the country. Did it affect you negatively?
No.
It didn't, eh?
I always gave people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And then if they fail to live up to that, well, then I just quietly ease them out of my life.
Right. That's remarkable to be able to do, because a lot of people hold grudges. Do you hold grudges?
Nope.
You don't, eh? That must be makes sleeping a lot easier at night. Makes dinner parties easier, too. Tell me what you're most proud of in terms of the legacy that you've left, both as a cabinet minister, a prime minister, a party leader,
well,
a person.
I think as Minister of Justice, I restored the balance between the citizen and the state, restored the right of appeal of citizens against expropriation, against taxation, against all sort of federal parliamentary intervention, set up the federal court as an appeal court of every administrative tribunal in Ottawa and across the country, so that the ordinary citizen would have a right to appeal administrative judgments. And that was, I believe, a significant achievement, and I'm very comfortable with it.
Was there a moment, or has there been a moment in Canadian history that stands out most clearly, times when you were involved, things that happened with the country or the world that you were involved in that really stands out for you?
I love being in the House of Commons when our flag was declared the new Canadian flag. That was great.
Didn't you get one of them?
Yep.
You got the second one, didn't
Yep.
you? And does it still fly over your
Our cottage in Kenora.
your family cottage? It's still there?
Yep.
It's in good shape?
It's not in too good shape.
No. Oh, that's wonderful. That's really a piece of history to have flying there. Yes, you've really managed to have such an exceptional career, sir, and you continue to be active. You continue to be out there speaking and trying to engage young people. What do you view your role as now?
As a encourager, encouraging particularly the young people become involved in a free country, in the governing of that country. Augustine, to whom God gave some talent, let him or her give it back. Democracy does not happen by accident. Become involved. Get out there. Give something back.
Mr. Turner, I thank you very much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure to have the opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.